Hello there, everyone, and welcome to Friday, August 14th. It's almost the weekend. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's news project, and we'll get rid of that phone call there. Technology is wonderful when it works. Um, anyway, where was I? News project live here on August 14th, and good to have you with us today. Gonna just go quickly through some of the major news stories of the week and to bring you up to speed on kind of what's going on, not only here in the neighborhood, but a few other little statewide notes as well. So the big story this week was obviously the primary election that was held on Tuesday, August 11th. I guess the main story really is the voting turnout. We had a record number of folks go to the polls for a primary election in the state. More than 157,000 Vermonters either mailed in ballots or trekked to the voting booths, and that smashed the 2016 record of, I think it was around 120,000 people who voted that year. That works out to be somewhere between 30 and 40% of eligible voters casting ballots this year, which was a much significant improvement over the normal primary voting turnout. So we'll see where that all takes us to in November, when the mail-in voting, which kind of was a bigger factor this year than in years past, as it was made a little bit easier to do that. And this for November, ballots will be mailed to all voters. So those who wish to cast their ballots that way will be able to do that. Quickly, just running down through some of the primary results. Not really news any longer to most of you who follow this stuff, but as you already know, Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman was the winner in the Democrat Party gubernatorial primary. He won 44% of the vote, roughly 48,000 votes, beating former Education Secretary Rebecca Holcomb, who garnered 37,000 votes, or roughly 34 to 35% of the total. Bennington County's representative in the gubernatorial election, Pat Winburn, an attorney from Bennington, finished in third place with about 7% of the vote, 7,000 votes roughly. So Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman will go on then to challenge incumbent Governor Phil Scott in the general election in November, and probably to nobody's surprise, Mr. Scott won handily in the Republican gubernatorial primary, where he took about 42,000 votes, or 72% of the totals cast in the Republican primary. His nearest challenger, John Clark, finished a distant second, getting about 13,000 votes, or about 22% of the total. Um, the governor will face off against the lieutenant governor in the gubernatorial primary, and it should be kind of interesting to see how that plays out. Um Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman came out, fairly strongly early this week at a press conference or a campaign announcement held on the State House lawn, and I'm sure it's going to be an interesting fall campaign. It certainly was an interesting race in the lieutenant governor race, which is normally, I guess, nothing you would normally consider interesting, I suppose, unless you're directly involved in it. But on the Democratic side, we saw Molly Gray, who's I believe, a 35 or 36-year-old assistant district attorney, political newcomer, has never run for public office before, um, but garnered the support from a lot of the Democratic Party establishment figures like former governors Madeline Kunin and Peter Shumlin. Uh, Got out of the gate early with some strong fundraising and defeated the Senate Pro Tem leader Tim Ash, who had served as a state senator for several years, and before that, a Burlington City Councilman. I'm sure would have been considered the odds-on favorite back earlier this year, but Mr. Ash got about 36,000 votes to Molly Gray's 47,000. So Molly Gray is the Democratic Party's nominee for lieutenant governor, and she will face off against Scott Milne, on the Republican side, who won the Republican nomination for lieutenant governor. Scott Mellon, as many of you remember, ran for governor in 2014, almost pulled off the upset of the century by beating Mr. Shumlin, but fell about 2,000 votes short. Um, he ran again in 2016 against Senator Pat Leahy for the Senate seat and was didn't come quite as close as that as he did in 2014. But anyway, Scott Milne will go on to pair up with Governor Scott for the Republican ticket. The other kind of statewide race was sort of interest down our way. It had some local residents. Was the state auditor race, which again, as you know, featured Representative Linda Joy Sullivan. She represents the Dorset, Danby, Landgrove, Peru, and Mount Tabor district currently. She ran against the incumbent auditor, Doug Hoffer. Ran strongly down here in the southern end of the state, but statewide fell a little short. Hoffer wound up getting about 51% of the vote statewide compared to Linda Joy Sullivan's 35%. However, Linda Joy Sullivan also got enough write-in votes that she could theoretically run as a Republican in the November election, and we'll see if that's the route she goes. She's also going to be on the ballot to run for re-election for her seat in Dorset, which she won in the Democratic primary there, facing no opposition. So she garnered close to 90% of the vote, I think, with the rest being blank or spoiled ballots. So, interesting race. Apparently more to come on that one. And then probably the one closest to home in terms of kind of local interest, one of the very, very few competitive races at the state representative level. In the Bennington 4 district, we had three candidates in the Democratic primary vying to capture the top the two seats that would be available to represent the district in Montpelier. So incumbent Representative Kathleen James was successful in getting one of those two nods, as was Seth Bongartz, a former legislator from back in the 1980s, who's more recently been known as the person who's been running Kildene, the Lincoln family home. They finished 1 and 2 in that race. Jamie DeFore, a Manchester businesswoman, finished third. So Representative James and Seth Bongartz will go on to compete in the November primary, where they'll face off against the other current incumbent state representative, Representative Cynthia Browning, who will be running this year as an independent. That sets up, I think, another extremely interesting race, and one we'll be sure to follow pretty closely. So yeah, that about covers it for primaries. Let's see, otherwise, school openings, of course, continue to be a subject of great interest locally as it is nationally. Still a lot of concern out there as to whether or not we're at a point where schools can be safely open, but in Vermont, we currently have the lowest infection rate per capita in the entire country. So in theory, if schools can reopen anywhere in the country, I guess for in-person classroom learning, it should be here. Most of the schools that we've been talking to are talking about some kind of hybrid model where students will be in class for part of the week, learning remotely the rest of the week. A lot of care and attention being given to keeping the building sanitized and cleaned, and keeping things as safe as possible for the students and staff and faculty members. An interesting side note on that, which we've been following and we'll be kind of doing a piece on a little bit later this week, is the enrollment spike that we're seeing in a couple of area districts. Up in Winhall, they're looking at about 37 new students, at least as of a week ago. It's a number that's probably going to shift around a bit before we get to September, but a big enrollment jump there. Folks that may already have some kind of connection to that area or are looking to get out of an urban area and move up here because they can work remotely. Burton Academy is also seeing a big enrollment jump. and probably some of those students from Win Hall are going to Burton. But anyway, it's kind of interesting to notice that because it has been a topic of concern that enrollments were at best kind of stagnant or stable or declining. The short-term effect of the COVID-19 pandemic seems to have been that more students are going to be going to school here in Vermont than were expected previously. Um, Meanwhile, the Manchester Development Review Board has recessed its hearing on the Bourne Brook project. It's one we've been following a little bit here. It's a proposal to make an upgrade to an inn restaurant at the end of Benson Road at the in East Manchester. That's drawn some local opposition from some of the neighbors who are concerned about traffic and noise impacts. That hearing has been recessed until I believe September 2nd, when the DRB will go back and have another hearing on it. But it's been one of those developments that has sparked a little bit of local controversy in the meanwhile. The new track and field facility over at the Manchester Rec Park that was built in conjunction with Burton Academy is almost ready for its official opening. I think they had planned to have a ribbon cutting ceremony this past Tuesday, the 11th. That was postponed for at least a couple of weeks, but the facility looks almost ready to go. And that'll be quite a nice little addition to the local sporting scene. Just to wrap things up here, the governor at his Friday press conference earlier this morning announced that he was going to be extending the state of emergency declaration for another month. This is the one that was put in place back last March when the pandemic was first coming on. Basically, even though the numbers in Vermont look very good in terms of number of positive cases for coronavirus, the rationale for extending it is basically because schools are reopening, and in particular colleges are also welcoming their students back to the campuses. Concern being that that'll prompt larger than desired social gatherings, parties, that sort of thing, and that's been identified as a major source of the spread of the virus. So what this does is give local community leaders, mayors, town managers, etc., select boards, the ability to, sort of set some additional rules, or would be allowed to limit crowd sizes, and perhaps set curfews on bars and other operations. So the main message that the governor had was that it was almost exactly 5 months since that first emergency declaration back in March. It's been a very long haul, and much has happened since, but it's not over yet, and we need to remain kind of disciplined around face masks and social distancing and the other measures that have been successful at containing the spread of the virus. Otherwise, the legislature will be returning to work on August 25th. They're going to finish work on the fiscal 21 budget. They started that earlier this year, got a short-term budget together for the first 3 months, and those 3 months are now just about up. So they're going back to work on the 25th to develop a budget for the remaining 9 months of fiscal year 21. And that comes against the background of some new numbers that were shared by the state's main economists, projecting that the state's general fund right now is projected to see a more than $182 million loss in fiscal year 21, and they're also anticipating around $103 to $104 million loss in fiscal year 22 as things stand now. The governor, of course, is hopeful that the federal government will give a little more flexibility around how some of the CARES Act money can be used. So that, again, that's a number that could change at any point. The Transportation Fund is expected to see a $29 million loss for FY21 and a $15 million loss in FY22. The Education Fund is looking at a potential $62 to $63 million loss in fiscal year 21 and $38 million or so in fiscal year 22. But those are very numbers that have jumped around a lot. And on the good news side, the initial forecast back in April was that fiscal year 21 could see a loss of up to 430 million. So things are at least moving in the right direction. Um, Governor also announced, not at his press conference, but uh, through announcement from his communication operation, that the state is also giving out $3.2 million in downtown and village tax credits to support 30 different projects in 27 communities around Vermont, and one of them is coming to Manchester. That would be for the former Mark Skinner Library building, which, as many of you know, will be has been bought and will be turned into become the new home of the Silver Fork Restaurant, which used to be in one of the buildings just down the street there. Uh, so folks there got a tax credit of about $82,250, and that will help, I guess, get that operation up and running. Um, there are a couple of other projects in Bennington that also got some assistance there. So that sounds good. Um, Again, Route 30, we're continuing on Route 30 between Manchester and Dorset. Motorists are advised to expect slight delays, and there'll be alternating one-way traffic patterns in the vicinity of the active construction sites between the two towns. And just a final reminder, Arlington Farmers Market is going to be happening this afternoon, starting at 4 o'clock till 7, and good place to go to get some fresh veggies and local produce. Well, that'll do it for today. Thanks for being with us. Hope you enjoyed the show and have a great weekend, and stay safe, everybody. All right, we'll see you next Friday.